Only during the conversation.
Can't hear you.
Welcome, everyone. We're good? We're all, yeah, I think we're all. You guys can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Welcome, everyone. Yom Yerushalayim Sameach. For the Bednarsh, I think that Yom Yerushalayim is already over for today, for this year. But for us, we're very much in the beginning of our Yom Yerushalayim. And I am honored to welcome personal mentors. Welcome, everyone. We're good? We're all, yeah, I think. Okay. I'm excited. Sorry, just figuring out a few of the technicalities here. I am excited to welcome some of my personal mentors, Rabbi Asaf and Rebbetzin Bednarsh. I had the schus to live on the Grus Kollel campus, the YU Israel campus, 2 years back when my husband was learning in Rav Bednarsh's shiur, and I was able to train under Rebbetzin Bednarsh how to become a Kala teacher. So I have really benefited tremendously in my personal life and my personal Torah learning from both of these amazing individuals. So just to introduce them before we launch into our Yom Yerushalayim conversation today. Rabbi Bednarsh holds the Ruth Bookbinder Mitzner Chair in Talmud and Jewish Law at Yeshiva University's Ritz Kollel in Yerushalayim and teaches at Yeshivat Har Etzion. Lior Bednarsh is a graduate of Drisha's Scholars Circle and the Kerem Ariel Program for Yotzot Halacha at Nishmat. She holds a BA in Psychology and Linguistics from Princeton University. They are additionally part of the Mizrahi Speakers Bureau, and we thank Mizrahi for helping us to facilitate this program today. So welcome, Rav Bednarsh and Rebbetzin Bednarsh. We are so excited to have you at least visit us virtually in Chicago. And may I say, it's May and it's 40 degrees outside, so you definitely chose the better way to visit.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
So just to start out, what was your Yom Yerushalayim like today? I know that the day definitely took a turn, so I would love to hear, what did your Yom Yerushalayim include this year?
So I'll say it was some ups and downs. I'll start with last night. We had a very, one of the most incredible tefillot that I've participated in our community, which really took place as a result of Corona, and there was Baal Tefillah that was asked to lead Yom Yerushalayim davening, and in the shul that he was asked to lead it, they don't let kids that are not vaccinated in the same area as adults, and he said, I'm not going to daven without my child next to me. So they agreed to have it outdoors in the park, and he said, well, if we're having it in the park, then we should really have music. And they had live music, and it became a massive party. It was just, people, many people came, and there was plenty of room. The weather was amazing, and the energy was incredible, and we just sang and danced for an hour and a half, and it was really wonderful. And then this morning I went to the OU, and some midrashot had tefillah at the Tayelet overlooking the old city, and that was also a real high. And then the events of the later afternoon were definitely more troubling, knowing that some of my kids were in the center of town, and the sirens, and my daughter-in-law having to decide whether she's they wanted her to come and do miluim in the army in intelligence, and she had to decide whether she was going to drive down south where there's rockets and other stuff going on, and and kind of that's where our headspace is right now. So we're sort of taking a pause from that worry to to be with you guys.
I definitely, we're together, had this very similar experience today. But it is definitely, the end of the day is not what we expected. You may be familiar. I have a WhatsApp. I get a lot of shailas. The last shaila I answered before we started this meeting was, I usually, I wanted to go to a shir tonight. The shir is going to be at 9 o'clock, and 9 o'clock Islamic Jihad declared they're going to start shooting rockets. Should I go to the shir or should I stay home? Okay, I advised the fellow to stay home, but that's not what we thought we were in for today. But I do think that even though it definitely marred our celebration, but I do think that it reinforced the themes of the day. Number one, what is this all about? It's really all about Yerushalayim. It's all about Har Habayit. It's about how our enemies recognize how important it is, how historically significant it is. Every Jewish home that's built in Yerushalayim near the Old City, every Jewish presence in the Old City in the vicinity of Har Habayit, our enemies recognize that there's something big going on, that it's worth fighting about. And that's a reminder to us of really how big the historical moment is. And I would say additionally, how much work there is still to be done. There's the celebratory aspect of Yom Yerushalayim. We're 41 years since the tremendous miracle of the Six-Day War, which 54 years, sorry, since the tremendous miracle, which was not just saving the entire Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael from destruction, but Har Habayit B'Yadeinu, as we've probably heard the recording, getting the place of the Beit HaMikdash back into Jewish hands. But there's so much more to do. It reminds us that Yom Yerushalayim is not just a day of Shevach Hoda'ah, to thank Hashem and to appreciate what we have, but maybe a day to rededicate ourselves to doing more, to working harder, to increase Jewish presence in Yerushalayim in whatever way we can, to maybe move ourselves a little closer to Yerushalayim, and to, in our davening, asking Hashem for a little more of Yerushalayim. Every day the Arabs rile up their congregation, their sermons, saying the Jews are coming. They're about to bomb the Al-Aqsa Mosque and build their temple on this site in Yerushalayim. And I guess it reminds me that maybe I'm not about to bomb any mosques. I think we need to go about things in a calm, logical fashion. But at the very least, when I'm standing up for Shemona Esrei and it says 3 times a day, V'li Yerushalayim Ircha B'rachim Tashuv, to really think, they know that the most important goal for the Jewish people is to take Yerushalayim to the next step. And maybe that reminds me that I should feel a little more in my heart that I really, really want that next step for Yerushalayim. Sometimes we need the Arabs to remind us of what's really important to us.
Right, definitely. I was going to say, if only every day I thought that I was prepared to go build the Beis HaMikdash, maybe if each of us thought that, we'd be a little closer. So jumping off of that point of moving the Jewish community closer to Israel, what inspired you to make Aliyah? Were each of you those people that were, from the minute you could think about it, were ready to make Aliyah? How did it come about? How did it practically play out? Baruch Hashem, this summer we have many families from Chicago making Aliyah. And we know that every person arrives at that decision differently. So we would love to hear how you came to make your Aliyah.
Okay, so I'll start. My mom is Israeli, and she left Israel when she was 16. Her parents had to move for financial reasons. And she promised herself that her, literally on the boat, that her children would, she would raise her children to want to make Aliyah. And Baruch Hashem, 2 out of 3 of us are here. My parents just made Aliyah this September, thank God.
Wow.
My in-laws also made Aliyah this year. So I definitely was raised in that way. And that expressed itself by going to a Zionist school and I'll say a formative moment for me when I decided was when I was 12. We went on a family trip to Israel, and I just fell in love and said, like, this is where I have to be, and I made it my business somehow from the time I was 12 to until we made Aliyah, which was when I was, how old was I? I was 34. So every year I was in Israel. So whether it was a summer program I remember when I look back now, I'm like, how did I do this? But at the end of 8th grade, I found a summer program for high school students. So I was like the only, like youngest, like 8th grader who went with no friends, but I just was like, I'm going to Israel. And so I made it my business to be there, whether it was the summer or this, or whatever. I just made it, I was able to do that. And so that was how I made my decision.
And I was raised in a Zionist home, probably like many of us were raised in, but I was not raised with the tachlis aspect of actually thinking that I would move to Israel someday, until I got here to yeshiva after high school, to Shana Aleph. I studied in the Gush, and I saw two things. I saw real people living here, and I just saw the way they lived. Now, the way they lived back home where I grew up was wonderful. It was really, even though it was in New York, it was a wonderful community with nice people. But it was just different. The idealism, the lack of materialism, the feeling that we're living on a different spiritual plane. When I met people who lived in Israel, whether people affiliated with the yeshiva, people in town, my parents' old friends who lived in Israel, it just felt different. And the more I learned, I had all my years of elementary and high school education, and Israel was there a lot, but it wasn't really connected to what was going on right now. I finished high school not necessarily realizing that, like, the books of Tanakh that we probably skipped in high school anyway have nivuot that were coming true in our lifetime. And I showed up in Israel, and all of a sudden, you get a different education. And I began to realize that we were living in historical times, that there have been moments in Jewish history when Hashem sort of knocks on our door, as Rav Soloveitchik portrays in his Kol Video Fake, and says, something big is happening now. Open the door, be part of it. And for 2,000 years, we've been waiting for this, and we've been davening every day for the Geula. And Hashem shows up in 1948, and even more so in 1967, and says, here's the Geula. Do you want to be part of it or not? Do you want to be, as Rebbetzin like to say, do you want to be a player in that grand game of the sweep of Jewish history? Or do you want to be a spectator, watching, from the comfort of your living room on TV? And I just said, I want to be a part of this. Hashem is knocking on my door. I want to open it. I needed some chizuk from my wife to take that from a philosophical commitment to really something practical about, where we would build our family. And Baruch Hashem, I found someone who was even stronger in that commitment and more tachlis, practical about it than I was. But I think it's since that Shana Aleph in yeshiva, I just realized that, read the Tanakh. This is where Hashem wants Jews to be. And if I really want to be part of this, if I really want to, fulfill the Torah that Hashem gave us, if I really want to appreciate the gifts Hashem gave us, then we want to be part of it. We want to raise our family here. We want to raise our kids here. We want to send our kids to the army. We want to build this country in, whatever little way we can. We're not draining the swamps anymore. We're not the only people on our hilltop, but every person does their share. And if you have a lot of people and each one doing their share, then that's really what brings our geula to the next level.
Right, definitely. On that note, is there a role model or someone who you can pinpoint as someone who really formed your approach towards Aliyah, who inspired that original Zionism? I know Rebbetzin Bednarsh, you mentioned that your mother always had that feeling, but was there an educator or something you read or a specific Rav or someone that formed your approach towards wanting to make Aliyah?
I can't really see like one specific person. I can remember a moment in when I was in Israel for the year, and I was learning with I was in Lindenbaum and with Rabbi Bravander, who actually taught in Bravenders, quite a lot at that time. And I remember him saying something very similar to what my husband quoted from Rabbi Lichtenstein, about like, do you want to be part of Jewish history or do you want to sit on the sidelines and watch? And it was very much. It was very much, feeling like, of course, I want to be there, like I want to be part of it. But I'll also say, my husband described his experiences here in Israel from the yeshiva. I have a lot of relatives in Israel who are really incredible people and very involved in the more the Haredi Umi world, but it was the first time that, but spending time in their homes, it was the first time that I really felt like I really understood what it meant to live a Torah lifestyle authentically. There was something so authentic about it, and real and idealistic, and I just I wanted that. I wanted to have that and to be a part of that.
I would also say that there were a lot of influences. I don't know if I can, give the credit to one person. I would say in terms of my Rebbeim, when I was learning the Gush, Menachem Littag was a very big educational presence there. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with his name. And he taught us a lot of Tanakh. I considered it my Musar Seder, because ultimately the Tanakh is a book of Musar. It teaches us what our values should be and how to implement them. I think he really, he didn't indoctrinate me. He just sort of flipped a switch that said, read the Tanakh and ask yourself, what does this have to do with my life? And what does Hashem actually want from me? What's the easiest thing to do? What's the right thing to do? And once he flipped that switch, he didn't need to teach me anything. I just, I opened the Tanakh and I saw it there. Now, we had very close family friends, my parents' best friends, when they grew up, who lived in Israel in Ramot, who I spent a lot of time Shabbatot and Yomim Tovim with. And it was also just like a wonderful example. They were really the best people in the entire world. But it was a wonderful example of how to live in Israel, not necessarily in yeshiva. Okay, I ended up being a Rebbe in yeshiva, but just as what a regular person living in Israel means, as opposed to just a regular person living in America. And their minhag in their house was every Motzei Shabbat after Havdalah, they would pack the whole family in the car and drive to the kotel and go daven at the kotel. And back in those days, you could just drive up into Shar Hashbot and park right where there's an archaeological garden now. Things were much more Hamish, we would say. But it was just that's like living in the shadow of the Beit HaMikdash. I want that to be part of my life as well. There are wonderful people in America also who have great Shabbos tables and great families and great hashkafot, etc. But they can't pack their kids into the car Motzei Shabbos and hop over to the kotel. And it's just one of these things that's so special. Okay, I'll admit that we're not quite in that madrega. We don't pack our kids into the car every Motzei Shabbos and go to the kotel. But still, it's just it's really special when our kids, we send them to school. Obviously, we send them to school. They learn a lot of Tanakh because they're starting one step ahead because Hebrew is their native tongue. They don't have to learn a foreign language to learn Tanakh. But then they cover ground. They have a siyum on Sefer Bereshis. What do they do in my kids' school when they have a siyum on Sefer Bereshis? Okay, all the kids get on a 20-minute bus ride and go to Ma'arat HaMachpelah, where Bereshit happened, and celebrate the siyum there, looking at the place where everything they learned about, from Parshas Lech Lecha through Parshas Vayechi happened. And they do their little shtick of saying over Baal Peh, the brachot of Yaakov, staring at where Yaakov Avinu is right now. And then in Sefer Shemot, when they learn about the Mishkan, they obviously go and have a siyum. right, at the Kotel in the old city, right next to the Beit HaMikdash, which is a continuation of that Mishkan. And we're living what we're learning, it's just it's just an amazing zechut. I hope I speak for Lior as well, and I think I speak for everyone who makes Aliyah. We don't take credit for being brave, for being bold, for working hard and making this Aliyah work. We committed ourselves to give it a try, and there was a lot of hashgacha pratit min hashamayim. I feel Hashem runs the world, but I feel like until we decided to make Aliyah, Hashem ran the world, but we didn't necessarily see anything remarkable about it. It just ran sort of smoothly. And when we decided we were going to Israel, all of a sudden things started falling into place. Some in predictable ways, some in unpredictable ways, and we really give Hashem the credit for making things work. And I've actually heard that story from a lot of people, that they come with some degree of a plan. They try their best, and then somehow it works out in ways they couldn't have predicted. So I definitely think the credit goes to Hashem for our Aliyah, and I think for a lot of people.
Amazing. Rebbetzin Bednarsh, this is a question specifically for you. How do you feel that your role as a woman in Chinuch, in Klei Kodesh, is different now that you're in Israel? Because I know that you worked in Chinuch when you were living in America as well. How do you feel like your role has transitioned?
That's an interesting question. And I'm going to try to speak on two levels. One is my own personal journey, and one is going to be a broader perspective. And I can really only speak for my own experience. I taught in high school in America, and I am currently teaching in seminaries in Midrashot. And so they're very different. It's a different age group. It's the girls that come to Midrashot, it's a much more self-selective kind of more homogeneous kind of group than in high school. And there were certain things about teaching in high school that I loved. I loved the opportunity to really touch people that you wouldn't necessarily think, it's not obvious that they're looking for what you have to offer, but then if you can inspire them, then there's something really wonderful about that. And I worked in a school that had a very collegial atmosphere, and I developed great, wonderfully in that environment. The seminary world is very different than that. Everybody has their own hours, and they come in and out, and there's less of a team feeling. Although I've been in it for many years, so I have started to feel part of it. I do feel part of a team in each place that I am, but it's a different kind of experience. And part of it is because I'm an immigrant, so I don't feel like I would love to teach in high school in Israel, but I'm very I don't think that it's not something I've been willing to do, because I feel like the language gap is going to be part of my what I love about teaching is a relationship with the students, and with the language gap that's going to be much more difficult, and so I'm more comfortable with Americans, which basically means in seminary. So that's part of the but I have some friends who are, as Oli, made a very big effort to integrate much more, and have been successful in high school, and with the Israeli population. So that's something that Baruch Hashem, I feel that I'm in a fulfilling career, but I do feel that I'm an immigrant, and I'm sticking within my comfort zone, and maybe one day I'll branch out. But I do want to speak a little bit more broadly about being a woman in who cares about Torah mitzvot in Israel, and what that means in Israel, and what that means in America. And I'm going to again quote Rabbi Braminger from many years ago, when he was talking to us about a lot of the kinds of feminist innovations in shul, which is it was a very big issue. It was starting to be a big issue then in the 80s, and now it's even more so. And one of the things that he said to us, he had an interesting perspective. He said, it's much more of an issue in America than it is in Israel. Now, I have to say, it's coming in Israel, it's always behind the times, and often when it's an issue in Israel, it's often Anglos that make it an issue in Israel and not necessarily Israelis who make it an issue. And one of the things that he pointed out about that was that because in America, like you're a Jew basically on Shabbos in shul. Like that's the arena in which you really get to express your participation in the Jewish community. And so if a woman wants to participate in the Jewish community, so then the focal point is going to be in the synagogue, right? So then that becomes like a very, big issue in wanting to participate. And in Israel, it's less of an issue because the shul has a more peripheral kind of role, which is an interesting thing. There's pluses and minuses about that. But part of it is because your Jewish life is so rich and so full. The calendar of the state runs according to the Jewish calendar. And there's so many ways in which you can feel a part of things that it doesn't have to take, leadership doesn't have to take place in shul. It can take place in many, many forums and many arenas. And that creates a lot of opportunities and a lot less angst about certain things.
Right. Definitely. Makes a lot of sense. And Rav Bednarsh specifically, as someone who is representing, you are one of the few YU Rosh Yeshiva who live in Israel and are able to teach there. How do you feel that you view your role specifically as someone who has a chance to interact with these young YU, mostly boys who are training to become Rabbanim? How do you feel that your influence or your role is unique because you are meeting them when they are in Eretz Yisrael? I know my husband spent probably hours and hours and hours schmoozing with you every day to get your unique perspective on issues, but even without those hours and hours and hours, what is your unique role as a YU Rosh Yeshiva in Israel?
Just to give credit where credit is due, even if I were in YU in New York, YU is really a terrific, really special institution, and I think it'd be very special privilege to be part of that, and an honor. I think specifically here in Israel, what's special is that many of these, all my Talmidim have been here Shana Aleph, they've been here Shana Bet, they sort of thought about Israel from the perspective of, a very purely idealistic, theoretical perspective of a Shana Aleph, Shana Bet guy. And now they're back as adults and as future leaders of the Jewish people. And I see my role as two things. Number one, to get them to think about Israel more practically. Just living here already makes you think about it practically. Almost everyone in the Gross Kollel, a nickname of our campus, is at least theoretically thinking to myself, should I stay? Should I go back? Should I go back for X years and make Aliyah, etc.? To think about it practically as a place to live, but also to think a little more deeply. Now that they're adults, they see that Israel is it's not just Disney World. It's not just the Kotel. It's not just Ma'arat HaMachpelah. It's a real country with all the advantages of a real country, all the problems of a real country. It's a Jewish people with all the greatness of the Jewish people. And if you read the Tanakh or just read the newspaper, all the challenges of a real people, with their petty squabbles, with their weaknesses, with all the leadership challenges that brings. And I hope that I can help shepherd them through this year from a place of sort of Shana Aleph, Israel's Disney World. It's this perfect place, to a place where Israel is a real country with real problems and real issues, and that's part of what makes it the greatest place in the world. Hashem doesn't want us to build Disney World in Eretz Yisrael. We're not up to Yemos Mashiach. We're not building Gan Eden in Eretz Yisrael. We're building a country where, some of the people are going to be from and some of the people aren't going to be from. And it's going to be amazing that even the non-from people, learn so much about Torah and have so much Judaism built into their lifestyle. One madrega if they live in Yerushalayim, another madrega if they live in Tel Aviv, and think a little bit about the responsibility of what opportunities does that give us. In America, we care about all the Jewish people. We want to go out to Albuquerque and be makarev every assimilated Jew there, but we don't have a lot to start. And you never know. It might work, but we don't have a lot to build on. Here there's so much to build on. Everyone has so much Judaism that just needs to be taken to the next level. So get a realistic view of Israel, see where we can go with this. Think about Israel as a real country with an economy, with a health system, with a government bureaucracy, all of which is messed up in certain ways, but all of which is really great in certain ways. And what are Torah values? How does a Jewish state do that? What does it mean to have a Jewish state with a Jewish health system? What does it mean to have a Jewish state with a Jewish welfare system, with a Jewish court system? These are questions that we don't think about in America. And we don't think about every day on campus in Grus either. But I'd like to hope that part of my job is giving people a very realistic view of what goes on in Israel as a real place with real people, and an appreciation of how great and amazing that is, and how challenging that is, and how much work there is for all of us to do there. I really think that realizing that Israel is not perfect is not a turnoff, but is a tremendous inspiration. Forget about rabbis. If I am someone who works in high tech, thinking about the amazing things I could do for the Jewish state just by going into an office in Herzliya and being myself and being Kiddush Hashem, and bringing the whole, bringing everyone I work with a little bit closer, setting a good example, and at the same time building up the Israeli economy and supporting Jews and advancing the state. It's amazingly inspirational what I can accomplish. And we all want to be Kiddush Hashem when we go to work on Wall Street, in the good old US of A. But being a Kiddush Hashem in a high-tech firm in the Tel Aviv metropolitan area really means bringing the entire Jewish people, bringing the people who run this country one step closer to the Torah, being mechazik, the values they have. Because one of his grandfathers was a rabbi, the other one's brother-in-law is a rabbi, and they're all thinking about they're not assimilated Jews. They're all thinking about exactly what role does Torah play in my life. And even if you're not a rabbi, maybe sometimes, especially if you're not a rabbi, you can do tremendous things of bringing this country to where it needs to be. And I think that's in different ways part of the message that I'm trying to share.
Definitely, and I would say when my husband and I unfortunately had to leave Israel at the end of Grus, we definitely left with that appreciation of. I would say our appreciation of the state of Israel and living in Eretz Israel was so much greater than when we left. For me, my 1 year in seminary, my husband had spent many years in yeshiva, but leaving with this idea of after however long it took, we had an Israeli bank account. And that meant that however it was established was within the realm of like a Jewish state and what a Jewish law system, and having had to tackle regular life in Israel left us with so much more meaningful of an experience, and we're really able to connect to. It could have taken one or two less tries to get that bank account, and we probably would have appreciated it just as much, but what could you do?
I'll share that. I remember the experience after my year in Israel. The following year, my sister was in Israel for the year, and we came back for Pesach, and we came back and stayed in a hotel, and we were tourists, and I couldn't stand it. I hated it. I was like, I just want to live here. I don't want to be a tourist here.
Right, definitely. On a different note, I know that Baruch Hashem, you have been zocha to raise many children in Israel. What advice would you give to parents who are either making Aliyah with their families or are approaching their Aliyah and thinking of building their families in Israel? What advice would you give to parents?
Look, I'm not. I'm not sure that the advice I would give to parents in Israel as opposed to not in Israel is necessarily going to be different. I think that um, you I would say that you can't count on the school system or the community to impart your values to your children. That's something that you have to do. That's something that you have to do at home. You have to, of course, choose schools and choose a community that you feel will be the most supportive of your values. I think that that is something that you really, that I know that we felt that we could do in Israel much more than we could in where we were living in America. In America, we were, pretty hard pressed to choose a school that we really felt reflected our values fully. But even here, when I think it's definitely more reflective, I think that I don't think that there's going to be a school or a community that is 100% a mirror of you. There is definitely diversity, and that you need to own that. You need to be to impart, to speak with your kids and to let them see what you care about and what you're passionate about, and discuss with them when what they're seeing on the outside is not necessarily reflective of what's going on at home, and teaching them to respect those differences and to understand that it's okay to have that kind of variety, but try to hope that you're going to inspire your kids to want to, at least on some level, our kids are not clones of us, and Baruch Hashem, they have free will, and they are, individuals, and they're not the same as each other, and they're certainly not the same as us, and that's always challenging, But I think that our role as parents is to try to inspire them and try to guide them as much as we can, and also let them know that we have their backs, and that we're there for them as they develop into the wonderful human beings and make the choices that they're going to make.
I would just add that, even if you live in a community which is 100% exactly everything you believe in, and you send your kids to a school which is 100% exactly what you believe in, it's the parents' job to mechanic their kids. Schools are only schools, and communities are only communities, and youth groups, which are very big in Israel, are only youth groups, and the country is only the country. We're the parents, and we're the ones who are going to really make a difference. We find them the right sviva, the right kind of atmosphere. But we're going to make a difference if we are, show our kids the simcha of from lifestyle, and we share with our kids what we believe in and what we care about and how important it is to us, and we spend time with our kids, then that's hope, and we daven for our kids, then that's what Meretz Hashem leads to success. One thing I would point out is like a bit of an opportunity for chinuch, how we raise our kids, that's a little different in Israel than America, is, the role of, our Judaism. In America, I find often that, and there's a bit of an exaggeration, that when we want to bring up our kids to be Torahic Jews, that's very individualistic. You should keep the mitzvos. You should learn Torah. You should, all the things we believe in, which are, the basis of everything. But in Israel, there's another message. Part of being a Torah Jew is how you should comport yourself, and what your goals should be, and what your behavior should be, and what you should spend your time doing. And part of it is being part of Klal Yisrael. One of the messages which, it's so important and perhaps easier to teach my kids is that part of the Torah is not just being firm for yourself so that you will be firm in a Talmud Chacham and Yirei Shamayim, etc., but being part of Klal Yisrael, which means, care. I have to admit, something that I always struggle with is so much of the message of religious education is a little bit selfish. You should be like this, and you should be like that, and you should separate yourself from the bad influences so that you can be more firm, etc. And obviously, you have to be selfish sometimes, especially with your kids. We have to be selfish on behalf of our kids and with yourself. Einan mili mili, as Hillel says in Pirkei Avos. But here in Israel, it's just so much easier to balance that. Yes, you should have your own personal spiritual ambition and journey and relationship with Hashem. But also, Hashem didn't pick you. We're about to have a week from now is Shavuot. In Chicago, a week from now is still Shavuot day. The Hashem didn't come down to Har Sinai and give the Torah to any individual. He came down to Har Sinai and gave the Torah to Am Yisrael, ve'atem tiyu li mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh, a holy nation. And part of the Torah is bringing my kids up to care about the Jewish people, to care about defending the Jewish people. Whether it's doing something in the army, whether it's a Shevut Le'umi, serving the Jewish people. Really, one of the messages that it's much more natural to give my kids here is bringing them up to work on behalf of others, give of themselves on behalf of the community, just because it's so built into the lifestyle here. If a girl doesn't go to the army because that's not her her religious avoda, then she in our community. Most of the girls in our town, they do Shevut Le'umi. Instead of going to the army, they volunteer to help the Jewish people in non-military ways. But Shevut Le'umi is not a requirement. A frum girl has the right to a full exemption from the army. But I don't think anyone in this town, there's always perhaps people with their own unique personal situation. But the mainstream, no one in this town, no girl in this town would ever say, I'm exempt from the army because there's a religious exemption, so I'm just going to go to college. Or I'm just going to go to seminary, etc. There's this feeling that, no, to be a good Jew, I have to sacrifice myself to help the community. And, I really think that's exactly what Hashem wants us to be. And obviously in America, we also teach that to our kids, but it's so built in here. It's so built in and natural here. And why would you even think of after high school not doing something for other people? Right? You can go to Midrashah and Shevut Le'umi, you go to Hesder and Yeshiva and the army, but just do something for yourself, even if it's something religious, it's just, it's not, it's not what we believe. It's not Ritzon Hashem. It's not what Hashem came down in Har Sinai. He didn't talk to any individuals. He talked to the Jewish people. So I think that's just, a chinuch message that's so much easier to send here and so much more just in the atmosphere.
Definitely. Just one last long question, and then we'll end with one quick thing. Do you guys have another few minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're not going anywhere.
Okay, great. What do you think that the greatest challenge is facing Israeli society today? That from your personal perspective is something that we really have to work on?
In my humble opinion, look, there's a lot of challenges, obviously. Again, read the news today, and you see some of the challenges. But in my humble opinion, the greatest challenges are not from the outside. We have to keep our army strong. We have to keep deterrence. We have to be strong. But those are not the greatest challenges. The Arabs rioting in Yerushalayim, or unfortunately, a lot of places in Israel today, even rockets fired from Gaza, they're not going to fundamentally threaten our society. They're going to hamper us. They unfortunately have the potential to seriously hurt individuals, and every individual in Klal Yisrael, is like a limb of the collective body of Am Yisrael, but they don't threaten the existence of the nation. To me, the challenge that really threatens the existence of the nation is internal. And I think historians would say that's true of every great nation, whether it was the Holy Roman Empire or whether it's a nation that is physically small but spiritually great, like Am Yisrael, is how we get along with each other. There's so many, just we're human beings. There's not Disney World, there's a real country. In a real country, people come from different places, they have different hashkafot, they have different lifestyles, and it's hard for us all to get along. Some people are religious, some people are not religious, some are right-wing, some are left-wing, some are Haredi, some are Tzioni. it's really hard for us all to get along. And the sort of temptation, the Yetzer Hara, to split into factions and sects and fight with each other and demonize the other is so strong. To the Kochba Ubar Kochba specter that hovers, over, our Reshit Tzmichat Gulatenu is scary. And if anything, it is the potential to chas v'sholom threaten the existence of the state of Israel. It's if we don't get along with each other. So if we're not mechazik each other, then there's no way we can meet all the economic, military, political challenges of the outside world. If we're strong with each other, if we, have achdos between us, then I'm confident that Hashem is there with us and we can meet any challenge. So to me, if someone asks, what can I do for the state of Israel? The most important thing, the most important challenge is, how do we all get along with each other? Kirov, not Kirov just, yes, also of making non-from Jews from, but Kirov of bringing Jews closer to each other, which means also closer to Hashem, because, Hashem in our Torah is what unites us. So to me, the greatest challenge is, and I think it's a challenge we can succeed at, but we're not going to succeed automatically. We have to try, we have to work, we have to care to succeed at, is how to bring all the different kinds of Jews together, whether different kinds of religious Jews, whether religious and non-religious Jews, different kinds of Jews in every side, in every possible axis which you could use to measure, how to bring us closer together. And there's so much that unites us. I feel that once you get to the level of real people, there's such a palpable unity of, this never happened to me in, this is, Chicagoans might not understand this because we lived in Brooklyn before we made Aliyah. And, Brooklyn is very special in many ways, but it's a drega, it's its own madrega of, lack of achdus. When I walked the streets in Brooklyn, if I saw any from Jew, I would say in a loud voice, Good Shabbos. And they looked at me like I was a criminal. Like, how can you say Good Shabbos to someone that you don't know, or someone who has a different color hat or yarmulke than you do, or even if the same color yarmulke, and in Israel, this is a country where you walk down the street with, we're a little past that stage now, but I would walk down the street, I would definitely take at least my 50% share with the baby and the baby Bjorn, or whatever you call it nowadays, that baby carrier. And a random old Sephardi lady would come over to me and say, he can't breathe, that's dangerous. You have to move. Now, obviously, people designed the baby Bjorn knew what they were doing. He can breathe just fine. This is the 100th time I've been out with him, and he's breathed until now. But it's a great country where, a random old lady is coming, even if she's totally wrong, because she's concerned that your baby should be able to breathe and that maybe you don't know how to be a father. It happens to mothers also. It's just like everyone is there willing to help everyone. Like, there's so much love and achdus between Jews. When you meet another Jew on the street, then sometimes politics gets in the way, and all of a sudden, tries to corrupt us, tries to make us believe that we're in different teams, tries to make us believe that, that just because someone has a slightly different hashkafa, or even a very different hashkafa, that they're not on our team. And so I think that's the challenge, to take that old lady on the street and remind us of what we really believe in, how much we really care about and love each other. I don't know how to do it. Should we fire all the politicians and just walk down the street with baby carriers instead? It's not quite that simple. But I think that every Jew who really cares about the Jewish people and cares about his fellow Jew, and just walks down the street or goes to work or does whatever they do in their normal life in Eretz Israel, is helping us with that challenge. And I think we have it within us to succeed. And if we're together, if we have our achdus, then, Rashi says in the beginning of Parshat Nitzavim, the mashal of a bundle of reeds, you take every reed, you can snap it in half. Any Jew, our enemies could snap in half, whenever they want. You take a bunch of 100, 1,000 reeds, however hard you pull, you're not going to be able to break it. So that's our challenge, to be together, to be so strong that nothing can break us. And I'm very optimistic. I'm very optimistic about that challenge. Every time I meet a Jew who looks different from me, and I just go over and say hello and see the reaction, I become more and more optimistic about believing in our future.
Definitely. And lastly, let's start with Bednarsh. Did you want to?
No, we discussed it in advance and
Okay, great.
this answer.
The last question is, after all these years since you've made Aliyah, what is that moment or that story that still stands out to you as that moment that you said only in Israel? It can be something that happens once a year. It can be something that happened to you once. What is your only in Israel moment?
It's like hard to think on the cuff like this. I would have said the walking around in the baby Bjorn story if it hadn't been said already.
It's one of these things. I don't know how significant it is. I don't know how philosophical it is, but it's one of these only in Israel moments. I was just parking my car someplace random street in Yerushalayim, and there's a delivery van next door. And these delivery, it's not only Amazon that they have exposés on the news. Delivery guys everywhere work very, very hard. It's a tough, grueling job. Some guy in delivery, without a yarmulke, with tattoos, with whatever, comes over to me and says, Harav. It doesn't mean he knew I happened to be a rabbi, but he just means I have a yarmulke on my head. The time was about 10 minutes before sunset. Harav, do you have a pair of tefillin? I haven't put on tefillin yet today. And he knew you have to put on tefillin during the day. It was about the shkia. It's about the sunset. It happened to be, I don't usually drive around with my tefillin, in the late afternoon. It happened to be I had my tefillin in my car. And he was like so happy. He found some like piece of paper, put on his head. He put on the tefillin. He said, Kriyat Shema, with decent kavanah, this fellow. And it's just like, that's the Israel moment of, you can't judge a book by its cover, of Mi Ka'amcha Yisrael. He didn't look like the kind of fellow who put on tefillin every day. But you never know. You can't judge someone by how they look. And that's, that unfortunately, the odds in America of seeing a guy dressed like that who wants to put on tefillin are just so much lower because of all the assimilation. Because, where is he getting the value of tefillin from in the middle of, wherever he lives in America? It was just like, it's just amazing. Like, one of the things I've learned is not to judge any Jew till I really see them. I was in a tremp. That's also a special thing in Israel, the tremp culture, right? If you say hitchhiking in America, it sounds like, certainly the last thing you ever want anyone to do in life is hitchhiking. What kind of people hitchhike in Israel? Outside the big cities, that's part of the lifestyle. That's milos chasadim. That of course I want to take a random person in my car because why did Hashem put me here? To help other Jews as well. Why do I have a car and this guy doesn't? Because Hashem wanted me to have this chus of giving him a tramp. So I was once in a tramp, and it picked up again this like random girl in jeans and a tank top. And who, I would initially just not really think I had much to learn from. And she asked permission, proper etiquette, tramp etiquette. Can she take a phone call? Someone's calling her. I don't know what they were talking about. It's not polite to eavesdrop. And in any case, exactly what happened to her friend someplace wasn't that interesting to me. But she's saying, on the phone, saying, oh, amazing, Baruch Hashem, that's so amazing. Says, I was so worried about it. I went home and I said to him for an hour and I was so concerned. And how amazing is that Hashem came through. And I don't know exactly what happened, but it's just like, Halavai, I should go home and I'm the rabbi. Every time there's someone I know who's in trouble, do I go home and say to him for an hour? It was just amazingly inspirational. That just, to me, that's the Israel moment that you never know what every Jew has inside them, and really what you can learn from everyone.
I'll just share, and this, I don't know if this isn't only in Israel, and maybe it's only in Olin Shvat, and then maybe it happens in Chicago also, but we're just, Baruch Hashem, we just married off our second child last week. Our second child, Akiva, got married, and we just hosted Shabbat Shabbat and when the other side, suggested we do it on Shabbat and have the whole extended family, and this is over 60 people, I was a little bit overwhelmed. Like, how am I going to find? And during Corona, like, how am I going to find housing for everybody? And Baruch Hashem, like, we had a surplus of places. We could have put people in, many more places, and the neighbors were just like really, really forthcoming and really amazing. In fact, it's our second wedding this year. We had one, wedding in the very midst of Corona, and it was just at the end of a stagger. It was clear we weren't going to be able to have it at the venue that we were going to have. And a neighbor and dear friend, Shani Tarragan, who had told me when my son got engaged that she went out and bought string lights to host Shabbat Brachot, ended up hosting the wedding in her backyard. And now, I don't know if that's an only in Israel thing, because I think that I know there were backyard weddings in America also, but there was something, it was a communal wedding. Like, we had a very small wedding, but the entire community really participated from close or from far in whatever way they could. And there is this sense of real, like, extended family.
Definitely. Thank you so much for taking the time this evening. I was honored to be able to talk to you on Yom Yerushalayim, and I know it definitely added to my Yom Yerushalayim experience. So, Eretz Hashem, I hope that things quiet down and we only hear of the Besorot Tovot coming out of Israel.
Amen. Thank you. It's really a privilege to be able to be part of what you're doing in Chicago. And it's a special treat to be able to visit Chicago without experiencing the cold weather and without needing to get on a plane. And who knows, maybe we'll be able to make it there in person someday.
Yes, we'd love to have you in person.
Yeah. And in any case, hopefully we'll greet many of you who are following us from Chicago. Hopefully we'll greet you here sooner or later.
I mean, this summer, expect many new families in Israel.
One gross family where the entire extended family, all the siblings are coming and the parents are coming this summer.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Exciting.
We encourage everyone who can to make Aliyah. If you haven't found housing, just give us a call. We have a guest room.
Amazing. Yom Yerushalayim Sameach. Thank you.
Take care.